They called it unkillable, the human. Took it as a challenge. The alarm started before I could finish. My coffee. Red light poured across the walls of my cabin, and the ship's voice spoke three words that froze every human: tell Tani and Bramir on board. Sector 7 breach. I was out of my bunk in a heartbeat. My name is Dane Kavak, and I am the only human on the survey ship Arden Meridian. 8 months of quiet missions, mapping dead stars and collecting dust samples had not prepared me for this. I grabbed my jacket and ran for the bridge. The corridor was already full of crew. Tall Bramir named Val, our captain, pushed past me with his heavy shoulders. Lowered, his thick blue skin had gone almost gray, which I had never seen before. Behind him came Sessif, our navigator, her 4 eyes wide and her gill slits clamped tight. She looked at me as she passed, and her voice was barely a whisper. Do not ask questions, Dane, please. But I had to ask because I had just heard the word that every crew member had been avoiding for weeks. Koruvax. I had first heard it 3 nights ago. I was eating a late meal in the mess hall when 2 of the engineers started whispering near the coffee machine. One of them said the word, and the other slapped a hand over his mouth. They had both looked around like somebody might be listening. When they noticed me watching, they left their food and walked out. I had asked Sessif what it meant. She had stared at me for a long time and then said a human should not ask. A human especially should not answer. Then she had gone to her bunk without finishing her meal. Now running toward the bridge, I finally understood that whatever Koruvax was, it was coming for us. The bridge doors hissed open. Captain Val was already in his chair barking orders. The main screen showed a map of nearby space, and one red point was pulsing at the edge of a dark, empty sector. Our ship was moving fast, not toward the point, but away from it. What is happening? I asked. Val did not look at me. Our orders changed. We are no longer mapping this region. We are running. Running from what? A small, old voice answered from behind me. From something that should still be in its cage. I turned. Dr. Erie, our ship's scientist, stood in the doorway. He was the oldest member of the crew, a thin creature with silver skin and long fingers. He had been kind to me since my first day on board. Now his kindness was gone. Only fear was left. Come with me, Dane, he said. You deserve to know, since you will not stop asking. I followed him down 2 decks to his lab. The room was full of old books and glass jars and strange small machines. He closed the door and locked it. Then he sat down heavily in his chair. 10,000 years ago, he said, our ancestors found something, not a planet, not a star, a living thing floating in the deep. They studied it. They tried to bring it home. That was their mistake. He poured himself a small cup of blue liquid and drank it in one swallow. The thing woke up. It began to grow. It began to eat. It ate ships. It ate stations. It ate whole colonies. Every species in the old galaxy sent their fleets against it. They used every weapon they had: fire, ice, radiation, poisons. They broke it into pieces and scattered the pieces across 3-star systems. Every time the pieces grew back, every time the creature returned bigger and hungrier. He looked at his hands. After 1,000 years of trying, they stopped. They built a cage, a prison the size of a star system, made of warning beacons and machines that would stop Anything from going in or out, every species signed the agreement. Nobody would ever go near Sector 7 null. Again, we named the thing inside the cage. Korvax, I said softly. He nodded. It means the thing that will not end. For 10,000 years nothing has gone in. Nothing has come out until today. I sat down on the edge of his desk. My heart was beating very fast. What changed? A science team, a secret science team. They went in 6 months ago against every law and treaty. They wanted to study the Korvax to understand it. Maybe to use it as a weapon. They sent a signal out 12 hours ago. It was a cry for help. Then the signal went silent. Our ship is the closest vessel. Command ordered us to go in and get them. But we are running away, I said. Yes, Captain Vol just refused the order. He would rather lose his rank than go into that sector, and I agree with him. I am old Dane. I have read every file in the Coalition archives. I have seen the pictures. The Korvax is not a creature you fight, it is a creature you hide from. I stood up slowly. The ship shook under my feet. On the wall screen the red dot was growing. Doctor, I said carefully, what happens if the cage is already broken? He looked at me with watery eyes. Then the old agreement is over. Then every world in the Coalition is in danger. Then 1,000,000 years of careful peace ends in a single year. And nobody can stop it. Nobody has ever stopped it. Every species that ever lived has tried. Korvax cannot be ended. That is the one true thing in our universe, Dane. The one certainty, it cannot be ended. I was quiet for a long moment. Then, without meaning to, I laughed. It was a short, nervous laugh, but it was a laugh. Irieri's face changed. He rose from his chair with more speed than I thought his old bones could manage. He grabbed my wrist. No, he said. No, 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 I have seen that face before. I have read the human files. Whatever is moving inside your head right now, Dane Kavak, you must bury it. Do you hear me? Bury it deep. Doctor, I only meant. I know what you meant. His long fingers tightened. Your species has a sickness. When you hear a thing cannot be done, you hear it as a challenge. You hear it as an invitation. I have watched your people for 40 years. I have seen humans climb mountains that were called unclimbable. I have seen humans cure diseases that were called endless. I have seen humans cross oceans that other species would not even name. This is not bravery, it is a kind of madness, and here tonight it will get us all ended. He let go of my wrist. He sat back down. He looked very tired. Please, Dane, go to your bunk, sleep. Forget the words you heard tonight. Let Captain Vol take us home. I walked out of the lab. I went back to my cabin, but I did not sleep. I opened my terminal. I used my liaison access to pull every file on Sector 7. Null every failed mission, every broken ship, every photograph of the creature that the old fleets had taken before. Their cameras went dark. The images were an awful, a snort shape that could not decide what shape it was. Mouths that were not quite mouths, eyes that did not seem to be eyes but felt like being watched. I studied the files for 6 hours, and the more I read, the more one thought burned in my head. Nobody had ever tried to understand the Korvax. They had only tried to break it. They had thrown weapons at it and then run away when the weapons failed. Nobody had ever asked the right question. About it, nobody had ever looked at it. The way a human looks at a locked door. Around the 5th hour, the ship shook. Hard, I ran back to the bridge. The red dot on the map was no longer dot, it was a spreading stain. The cage was breaking. Pieces of the Corovax were escaping into open space. Captain Vol was shouting into his communicator. The coalition command was shouting back. There were no other ships close enough. There would not be any other ships in time. Sesseth turned to me with tears in all 4 of her eyes. Dane, I am sorry. I am so sorry. Why are you sorry? Because command has ordered us to turn back and Captain Vol has accepted. We are the only ship close enough to try. Vol rose from his chair. He looked at me like a man looking at his own grave. Specialist Kovac, you are the only human on this vessel. The coalition believes humans may see things we cannot. Will you come with me to the cage? Every crew member on the bridge was watching me. Ear, he stood in the doorway, shaking his head slowly, silently, begging me to say no. I thought about his warning. I thought about 10,000 years of failure. I thought about the one locked door that nobody had ever opened. I smiled. Captain, I said, I would be honored. The ship turned. The warning beacons began to sing their ancient song in our speakers, and somewhere in the dark ahead of us, something very old, very hungry, and very bored began, for the first time in 100 centuries, to pay attention. The cage of Sector 7 Null was not what I expected. I had imagined bars of some kind, or glowing walls, or a swirling barrier of light. Instead, as the ardent meridian slid through the edge of the system, I saw only silence, empty space, a few dim warning beacons blinking red. The cage was mostly an idea, a promise, a treaty made by frightened civilizations long ago, and that promise was breaking right in front of us. Captain Val stood at the front of the bridge with his arms folded. His blue skin had returned to its normal color, but his voice was quiet in a way I had never heard before. Navigator, slow approach, sensors to full, weapons hot but no firing without my word. Sesseth's fingers flew across her console. Confirmed, Captain. We are reading the science station ahead. It is still intact somehow. Life signs very faint. 3 of them. 3 survivors from a team of 12, Val said. He looked at me. We go in fast. We grab them, we leave. Understood. Specialist. Understood, I said. But my eyes were already on the second screen, the one showing the area around the station. There was something moving there, not a ship, not a rock, a slow, dark shape that did not behave like any object I had ever seen. It flowed, it folded, it drifted through the void the way ink drifts through water. Dr. Erie came onto the bridge. He carried a small case in his hands. He walked straight to me without looking at anyone else. If you are truly going over there, he said, take these biological scanners. Old models, the new ones cannot see the Corovax properly. These will tell you what you are looking at. Thank you, Doctor. I am not giving them to you for thanks. I am giving them to you because I believe you will come back. I do not know why I believe this. I believe it anyway. He pressed the case into my hands and walked away quickly, as if he was afraid he might change his mind. Captain Vol, myself, and 2 Brahmer security officers boarded the small shuttle at the bottom of the ship. The launch bay doors opened. We flew out. into the strange, silent dark of Sector 7. No. The science station came into view, and I understood immediately that Dr. Iriiri's files had not lied to me. The station had been opened, not blown. Apart, not crushed, opened. The hull was peeled back in long curling strips, as if something had reached inside and unwrapped it like a gift. The metal edges were smooth, not sharp, as if they had been digested slightly and then spat back out. I had seen many wrecks in my career. I had never seen one that looked hungry. Steady, Vol said to the pilot. Take us to the reinforced lab. That is where the signals are coming from. We docked at a small emergency port. The Snort's shuttle seal hissed tight. We stepped out into a corridor where the lights flickered and the air tasted of old smoke and something else, something sweet, almost pleasant, which was the worst part. Biological scanner shows no active Corvax material on this deck, I reported, holding up Iriiri's old device, but the readings jump on the deck above us and the deck below. Something is moving through the walls. Then we do not stop moving either, Val said. Go. We ran. The corridor turned twice, then opened into a large lab, and there, huddled in the corner behind a barricade of overturned tables, were 3 survivors. A thin Vathari woman stood up first. Her 6-fingered hand was shaking as she pointed a small tool at us until she realized we were the rescue. Then she dropped the tool and began to cry. You came, she whispered. You actually came. Nobody was supposed to come. I am Captain Val. We have a shuttle. We have 4 minutes. Move. But the Vathari woman grabbed my arm. Her eyes were wild. Human, you are a human. Listen to me. Listen before we leave. My name is Dr. Mira. I led this team. I made the mistake. You have to know what it can do. Tell me while we walk, I said. She nodded. We moved fast. The 2 other survivors, a small Teltani man and a very young Brahmir, followed in a daze. They did not speak. I think they had not spoken in weeks. Dr. Mira talked as we hurried down the corridor. Her voice was flat and tired. The Corvex is not a creature. That is what nobody has understood. It is a pattern, a living pattern. It does not have one body. It has as many bodies as it needs. You break one, it grows 10. You burn 10, it grows 1,000. It learns. It remembers every time somebody hurt it over thousands of years. It remembered the trick. Now there is no weapon in the galaxy that can surprise it. Then how did you survive? We did not fight it. We hid. We built this lab inside 3 layers of signal blocking metal. It could sense us, but it could not see us clearly. It was like we were a shadow. It could not quite touch, so it waited. It is still waiting. For what? She stopped walking. She looked at me. For something interesting to happen. It has been hungry for 10,000 years, human. But it has also been bored, and that is the worst part of all. When we got here, we thought we were studying a weapon. We were wrong. We were studying a mind, an old, cold, lonely mind locked in a cage, waiting for anything new. Captain Vol shouted from ahead, move. Doctor, now. We ran again. We reached the shuttle. The 2 security officers pushed the survivors inside. I was the last to climb aboard, and as I turned to close the hatch, I saw something at the far end of the corridor. It was standing there. I do not know if standing is the right word. It was shaped like many things at once, a column of dark water, a tree, a Crouched animal, a person briefly in. Then not a person, its surface shifted. As I watched like it was trying to choose a form I would understand, I could not count its eyes because there were too many and also not enough. It looked at me, it knew I was looking back, and I felt suddenly and clearly that it was curious. Not angry, not hungry, curious. In the half-second before I slammed the hatch, I saw something I will never forget. I saw the Korvax tilt its many-shaped head the way a cat tilts its head at a new sound, and I felt a word press into my mind that was not my own. Interesting. The hatch closed, the shuttle fired its engines, we shot away from the peeled station, and behind us I saw the dark, shifting shape lift one of its gnawed arms in something that was almost a wave. Back on the Ardent Meridian, Captain Vall did not waste time. Orbital burn finish. The station full spread. The ship's weapons fired, the station became a bright flower of light, and then nothing. Dust. The old coalition rule was simple. Anything touched by the Korvax must be ended. Even the survivors would be checked, quarantined, and watched for 100 days before they could speak to anyone again. I went to my cabin. I sat on my bunk. I held my hands together tightly to stop them shaking. And then I did the thing that Dr. Erie had warned me not to do. I opened my terminal. I began to write. I wrote everything Mira had told me, everything I had seen in the corridor, every reading from Erie's old scanner. I laid the data out on my screen like puzzle pieces. I stayed awake all night and then all the next day, and I barely ate. The other crew members started avoiding me. Cessiv brought me food and water twice a day quietly and did not speak. Even Vol passed my door without stopping. They could see what was happening to me. They had seen humans get like this before. It is a look our species gets, a look that means we have found a problem and we will not rest until we solve it. Here is what I understood after 4 days of thinking. The Korvax was not unkillable because it was too strong. It was unkillable because every species had tried to end it the same way, by attacking it, by throwing more power at it, by treating it like an animal that could be hunted. But the Korvax was not an animal. It was a pattern, a living code, and you do not end a code by hitting it harder. You end a code by understanding its rules. Nobody had ever studied it properly. They had been too afraid. They had burned their notes and run away. For 10,000 years, every mind that had tried to look closely at the Korvax had been eaten before it could finish the thought. But the survivors of Sector 7 Null had seen it and lived. They had taken notes. They had blocked their signals and watched the thing for 6 months, and their notes, which Dr. Mira had carried out on a small data chip in her pocket, were now in my hands. On the 5th day, I walked to the bridge. I looked like a mess. I had not shaved. I had not slept, but I stood very straight in front of Captain Vall, and I saluted. "Captain," I said, "I wish to file a formal request for transfer to Coalition Station Threshold to the Korvax Containment Division." The bridge went silent. Cessiv put a hand over her mouth. Dr. Irieri, who happened to be walking past the doorway at that moment, stopped and turned very slowly to stare at me. Vol looked at me for a long time. Then he said, in a voice that was almost gentle, "Why, Dane?" "Because the cage is breaking, Captain. Because the Korvax is awake now, and it is curious because somebody has to find the answer before it gets out, and because I think I see a door that nobody else has noticed, and you believe you can open this door. I believe somebody should try. Val closed his eyes. He sighed a long, heavy Brahmer sigh that seemed to come from his feet. Then he nodded. Your request is approved, specialist. I will send the paperwork tonight, I hope. I am not sending a good man to his ending. I left the bridge. Eerie followed me down the corridor. He did not say anything until we reached my door. Then he placed one long silver hand on my shoulder. When they laugh at you, he said quietly, and they will laugh at first. When they tell you that 100 species across 10,000 years have all been fools, and that you, a young human from a small blue planet, have seen something they missed, when every general and diplomat in the coalition looks at you like you are a child playing with matches. Remember this, Dane. Yes, that every great change in the galaxy started with somebody willing to look like a fool. Go open the door. I will not be there to see it, but I will be proud. He walked away. I stood in the corridor for a long time, holding the small data chip Mira had given me, with every note her team had ever written about the creature that could not be ended. 3 years later, everything would change, but on that night I simply packed my things and I waited for the transfer shuttle, and I dreamed of a pattern that nobody had ever truly seen. 3 years is a long time. It is long enough to build a team from nothing. It is long enough to make friends, to make enemies, and to make a list of people who would like to see you fired, deported, or quietly forgotten. I had managed all three. I stood in the main briefing hall of Coalition Station threshold, waiting for the doors to open. My reflection stared back at me from the polished metal wall. 36 years old, a little more gray in my hair than there should have been. Coalition uniform that still felt strange across my shoulders, no matter how many times I wore it. Behind me my team waited, 6 of the smartest beings I had ever met, and one artificial mind who insisted she was not a being but was offended if you agreed with her. There was Priya Sharma, an epidemiologist from a small Earth institute who had spent 3 years teaching me how diseases actually end. There was Jonas Wielk, a Brahmi Air Materials engineer the size of a small truck who could build anything from any scrap. There was Dr. Mayura, the Vathari survivor from the station, who had recovered slowly over many months and then demanded to join my work. There was Teva, a Teltani mathematician with 6-fingered hands and a mind like a diamond. There was Henry Ford, a quiet, older human who had once designed containment systems for dangerous organisms on 3 different worlds. And there was the voice in my ear, soft and patient, belonging to the mind we called Cass. The delegates are seated. Dane, Cass said, your heart rate is high. Breathe slowly. You have practiced this. I have practiced this, I agreed quietly. You will not convince all of them. You only need to convince enough. I know. The doors opened. I walked inside. The hall was circular with raised seating on every side. 47 delegates, one from every major species in the coalition, sat in their assigned places. Some wore formal robes, some wore military uniforms, some wore nothing at all because their species did not use Clothing, every one of them was watching me. I recognized faces. I recognized hatred. On several of them, I had not made this easy for anyone. At the center of the hall stood a raised platform with a single small microphone. I walked to it. I adjusted the microphone to my height. I took a breath. Members of the Coalition Council, I began. Thank you for allowing me to speak again. I will keep my report short. I have been told it is disrespectful otherwise. A small wave of dry laughter rippled through the hall. Good, I needed them. Breathing. 3 years ago, I stood in this room. For the first time, I told you that the Corovax can be ended. I told you I had a plan. You did not believe me. You were right not to believe me because I did not yet have proof. I'm here today to give you that proof. I pressed a control on the podium. Hall lights dimmed. A projection appeared above us showing a small test chamber. Inside the chamber, a pattern of dark moving matter shifted and flowed. It was small, no larger than a man's hand, but its movement was unmistakable. Several delegates stood up at once. Bromir General shouted something that made his translator briefly refuse to speak. Please sit, I said calmly. That is not a live Corovax. We have not broken any laws. What you are seeing is a simulation, a copy. My team has spent 3 years building a mathematical model of the Corovax's pattern. What you see above you is that model running in real time. It behaves exactly as the real creature behaves. It grows the same way. It remembers the same way. It heals the same way. The general sat back down slowly. How? Asked a Teltani delegate from the third row. Her voice was thin with shock. How did you build this? We do not have enough data. We had enough, I said. Dr. Major's team, before they were lost, took 6 months of readings. Every species that has ever fought the Corovax left behind reports. Most of those reports were classified. Most of them were redacted. Some of them were burned and the ashes buried. My team and I pulled every piece of information that still existed in every language from every archive in the Coalition. We put it all together, and we learned something that nobody has seen before, because nobody has ever had all the pieces at once. I clicked the control again. The projection changed. The small pattern was now shown as a web of connections, pulsing with light. The Corovax is not a creature. Every species has made the same mistake. You have been trying to end an animal. There is no animal. There is a pattern. Living thinking pattern that spreads itself through any organic material it can touch. Weapons do not end it because the pattern is not in any one place. It is in all places at once. You cannot burn an idea by burning one copy of it. You must end the idea itself. I saw Dr. Yuri in the back row. He had come, though he was very old now and had to use a walking stick. He was smiling at me with tears in his eyes. Here is the second thing we have learned, I said. Every species in this room has been trying to end the Corovax the same way, by attacking it. More energy, more heat, more radiation. Bigger ships, bigger fleets. You have tried to outsize something that grows. You cannot outsize a thing that grows. Every strike you land feeds it. Every failure teaches it. The Kashari diplomat in the front row raised one long hand. Specialist Kavak, you have told us what does not work. Will you now tell us what does? Yes, I said. The Corovax is a Patterns copy themselves. That is what they do. That is all they do. And there is exactly one trick that every self-copying pattern in the universe is vulnerable to. A trick that 10,000 years of weapons cannot match because it does not use weapons at all. I leaned toward the microphone. You ask it to look at itself. The hall was completely silent. A pattern that copies itself has never been asked to copy the act of copying. That is a recursive loop. The Korvax has never met a recursive loop because it has spent 10,000 years in a cage, and in a cage nothing new ever happens. If we can force the Korvax to model itself, it will begin to spend more of its energy on the model than on its own growth. If we can keep it modeling, the pattern will collapse under its own weight. It will eat itself, not because we made it, but because we asked it a question it cannot refuse to answer. A long, low murmur ran through the hall. The Bromir general who had shouted earlier was now leaning forward, his heavy brow creased. This is a trick, he said slowly, a piece of cleverness against a creature that has swallowed fleets. Yes, General, it is a trick, that is the point. Every fleet you sent tried to bring more force. I am not bringing force, I am bringing a question. The Korvax will not know how to refuse it, because it has never been asked anything before. The Keshari diplomat rose slowly to her feet. Her species was famous for caution. Her voice when it came was very careful. Specialist Kavak, I must ask you something. It is not a scientific question, it is a personal one, and I would like an honest answer. You will have one. The why are you doing this? 100 species have lived and ended without ever considering what you now propose. Your own ship captain told you to run from the cage. Your own ship scientist told you to bury your idea. Your coalition has forbidden approach to Sector 7 null for 10,000 years. Why are you, a single human, standing in this room and telling us we have all been wrong? I was quiet for a moment, then I gave her the answer I had practiced many times in the mirror, and then I said it aside and I gave her the real one instead. Because my grandmother, I said, lived in a city that had a disease nobody could end. For 200 years, humans died of that disease. Every doctor in the world said it was unstoppable. Every priest said it was a punishment from the sky. My grandmother was a nurse. She lived to see the day when a small team of humans, working in a dusty lab with not enough money, found the trick that ended the disease forever. On the day they announced the cure, my grandmother was an old woman. She sat in her garden and she cried, and she said one thing over and over to me. Her small grandson on her knee, she said, they told us forever they were wronged. I looked around the hall. Every species in this room has a Korvax story, a thing your ancestors could not beat, a thing you decided was forever. Humans have stories like that too. The difference is that we never believe the word forever. Something in our heads refuses to hear it. When we are told a thing cannot be done, we hear it as a sentence with a question mark at the end. It is not bravery. It is not smartness. It is a kind of glitch in how we are built. It is a gift and it is a sickness and it is ours. And sometimes when the glitch is aimed in the right direction, it lets us open a door that everyone else had forgotten was a door. The Keshari diplomat stared at me for a long time, then she sat down slowly. Thank you, Specialist Kavak, she said. Softly, I have my answer. The vote came 40 minutes later after. Long speeches from every side. I do not remember most of them. I remember watching the numbers change on the wall screen. I remember the final count, tied at 23-23 with the Keshari delegates. Vote still missing. The hall went silent as she rose a second time. I vote yes, she said. Not because I believe in this plan, but because I am afraid of what happens if we tell this human no, he will do it anyway. I would rather he do it with our help than without it. Several delegates groaned, others nodded. Slowly the vote was recorded. Project Long Night was approved. I walked out of the hall in a daze. My team was waiting in the corridor. Priya wrapped her arms around me. Jonas slapped my back so hard I almost fell over. Teva was crying, which I had never seen a Teltani do. Dr. Yeri stood a little way off, leaning on his walking stick. He was smiling like a young man. I told you once, he said, that you should bury your idea. You did. I was wrong, Dane. I have been wrong before. I will probably be wrong again. But today I am happy to have been wronged. I hugged him carefully because he was fragile now. He patted my back with one thin silver hand. Go, he said. Open the door. I will listen to the news. I will cheer for you. Very loudly in my small room. I pulled back. You are not coming with us, doctor. No, I am too old and I have seen enough, but I have one more gift for you. He pressed something into my hand. A small old device, a biological scanner. The same one he had given me on the Arden Meridian 3 years ago. It still works, he said. Take it, aim it at the thing, see what nobody else has seen, then whatever you find, Dane, you must decide for yourself what to do with it. You do not have to ask permission from any council. You only have to ask yourself. I took the scanner. I put it carefully in my pocket. I will, doctor. 6 weeks later, my new ship, the Meridian 2, broke orbit and set course for Sector 7 Null, the cage, the creature, the oldest prisoner in the galaxy, who had been waiting, patient and bored and hungry for 10,000 years, and who I was starting to believe might have been waiting for me. We dropped out of fast travel at the edge of the cage, and the silence on the bridge was so heavy I could hear my own heartbeat. The Meridian 2 was a ship built for one job. It had no big guns, no troop bays, no flags or ceremonial decorations. Every wall was packed with computers. Every corridor carried cable. The engine room was half the ship by volume because what we planned to do required more processing power than most small planets had. Cass, our artificial mind, lived across 6 separate servers, each one locked behind its own containment door. If any one server became infected, we could cut it away without losing her. I sat in the captain's chair, which still felt strange under me. Jonas stood at the engineering console, his thick Brahmer fingers flying over controls too small for them. Priya and Henry were in the lab 3 decks down, running the last checks on our payload. Teva was at navigation. Dr. Mira was in the medical bay preparing for what might happen to any of us if we failed. Above our ship floated the old containment fleet, 240 automated platforms placed in a perfect sphere around Sector 7 Null 10,000 years ago by hands that had all long turned to dust. They had never been tested. They had only waited. Today, for the first time, We would ask them to work. Status check, I said quietly. All platforms online, Teva reported. Her voice was small. 10,000 years it is. Strange that they all still function. They were built to function, Jonas rumbled. Our ancestors were scared. Scared people build carefully. Bait is ready, Cass said in my ear. Stage 1 can begin at your word, Dane. I closed my eyes for a moment. I thought of my grandmother. I thought of Dr. Irieri sitting in his small retirement room many light years away, watching the news. I thought of every species that had tried this and failed, and of the long, lonely cage that I was about to open for the first time in 100 centuries. I opened my eyes. Begin stage 1. Deep inside our ship, a massive storage bay unsealed. A cloud of bait rolled out into space. It was beautiful in a strange way. Millions of small, soft pods, each one filled with material engineered to smell, to taste, to feel. Exactly like what the Korvax like to eat. My team had spent the first year of the project just on the recipe. The bait was not a trap. The bait was a meal, a feast, a glowing, drifting invitation. We watched on the scopes as the pods spread out into the center of the sector, forming a sphere of food of a small moon. Then we waited. For a long time nothing happened. The old warning beacons sang their song. The containment platforms glowed quietly. The bait drifted. Then Teva's hand went to her mouth. Movement, she whispered, all directions all at once. The main screen filled with red. Hundreds of points of motion, then thousands, then too many to count. Korvax had heard the dinner bell. It was coming out of every hiding place. It had dug in 3 star systems, every fragment of itself, every small sleeping pattern, every forgotten piece tucked in. The corner of a dead moon was moving now toward the bait. The pattern was converging. For the first time in 10,000 years, Cass said softly, the Korvax is in one place. Captain Val had told me long ago to never show fear on a bridge. I did not show it, but my hands gripped the arms of my chair very hard. Begin stage 2, I said. Deep inside the bait sphere, a second cloud released. This one was invisible. It was made of tiny machines, each no bigger than a grain of sand. They were Cass's children. She had designed them. For 3 years, each one was a small question wrapped in a shell. Each one carried a tiny piece of logic, a riddle, a curiosity, a thought. The Korvax swept through the bait sphere like a huge dark wave. It ate the food, it ate the pods, and without knowing it, it ate the questions too. Integration confirmed, Cass said. Korvax has accepted our payload. I can see its pattern now, Dane. I am inside it. Can it see you? I asked. It senses something, but it does not understand yet. It has never been asked to think about itself. It does not know what it is feeling. I leaned forward. Begin stage 3. Far away, across many light seconds of empty space, something began to happen to the Korvax that had never happened before. Cass's small questions began to bloom. The first question was simple. It asked the Korvax to notice itself, to check which parts of it were where. Any living pattern has to know what it is made of, at least a little. The Korvax accepted the question and began to answer it. It looked at itself. The second question built on the first. It asked the Korvax to notice the act of looking, to model the part of itself that was doing the modeling. The third question asked it to model That, the fourth question asked it to model. The modeling of the modeling. And so on. Each question was small, each question seemed harmless on its own, but each question required a little of the Korovac's pattern to be spent on thinking about itself instead of on growing or eating or being hungry. And each question produced a new question inside the Korovac's, which produced a new question, which produced a new question. This is called a recursive loop. No living pattern in the universe can resist it, because the urge to finish a thought is as deep as the urge to eat. On our screens, the Korovac's began to slow. Stage 3 stable, Cass reported. Her voice was steady, but I heard the wonder in it. The creature is now spending 14% of its processing capacity on self-modeling. 18, 22, 27. It does not realize what is happening. It finds it interesting, Dane. It finds it pleasurable, I think, for the first time in 10,000 years. It is not bored. Priya's voice came up from the lab. Quiet. It is like a cat with a mirror. It has never seen itself before. It cannot look away. The Korovac's movement across the bait sphere slowed, then it stopped. And GT snorts. And GT, the great dark wave which had been eating its way through every pod in sight simply paused. It hung in space, enormous and shifting, and it began to turn inward. Begin stage 4, I said. This was the hardest stage. This was the one that had taken my team the most time to plan. We had to starve the creature, not by withholding food, but by destroying every place it could use to regrow. The Korovac's could restart from a single cell in any organic material given time. So we had to remove every piece of organic material in the sector. The bait sphere was sterilized first. Specialized beams, very precise, turned every pod into clean dead atoms. Then, the old dead worlds of the sector, which had tiny traces of ancient life in their soils, were swept clean by our automated cleaning ships. Then the debris left over from 10,000 years of failed fleets, the slowly drifting metal and bone, was broken down and scattered. The whole job took 16 hours. The Korovac's did not notice. It was too busy thinking about itself. Stage 4 complete, Jonas rumbled at last. He was sweating, which Bromir almost never did. The sector is sterile. There is nothing left for it to regrow into. It is locked inside the only body it currently has. Begin stage 5, I said. This was the part I had insisted on. This was the part that every general and every admiral had argued with me about. This was the part where we close the trap. Every one of the 240 containment platforms activated at once. They had been waiting 10,000 years for their moment. Now they lit up one by one, and then all together like stars being born. Between them a field of energy rose, not a weapon, a fence, a true final fence, finer and stronger than anything our ancestors had been able to build when they first caged the Korovac's. The field closed over the sector. The Korovac's was inside it, alone, turned inward, unable to reach for new material, unable to spread. For a long moment nothing happened. Then the Korovac's noticed. I saw it on the screens, the great dark wave still mostly turned inward. Shivered, one part of it reached for the field, tested it, pushed against it. Field held. The Korovac's reached in another direction, reached in another, reached in 100 directions at once. The field held in every direction. And then for the first time in its long, patient life, the Korvax began to understand that something was wrong. The bridge lights flickered, Teva cried. Out, our sensors were picking up a new kind of signal from the creature, not an attack, a search. The Korvax was reaching out with every sense it had, looking for something to grow into. It was pushing, it was asking, it was panicking. It is starting to fight the loop, Cass warned me. It is trying to pull its processing back from self-modeling. If it succeeds, it will break free of the questions. If it breaks free, it will adapt. If it adapts, we will never get another chance. This is the window, Dane. Now, I took a breath. Begin stage 6, I said. And then I stood up from my chair. Because this last stage I was going to do myself. Stage 6 was my idea. My team had argued with me about it for weeks. Priya had cried. Jonas had threatened to tie me to my chair. In the end, they had agreed because they knew I was right and because they knew I was stubborn. The plan was simple. We could not end the Korvax with force. We could not end it with cleverness alone either. The loop would slow it but not finish it. It would escape eventually, unless we gave it one last thing, one thing it had never been given in 10,000 years, because no one had ever thought to offer it. I walked to the small communication chamber at the front of the bridge. Cass had built it to my instructions. Inside was a single chair, a single screen, a single direct link to the field of energy around the Korvax. When I sat down, I would be speaking to it, not in words, in pure pattern. Cass would translate whatever I thought, however I felt, into a form the creature could receive. I looked back at my team one last time. Priya had her hand over her mouth. Jonas was standing very still. Teva was whispering something in her own language, which I think was a prayer. Henry was watching me with quiet, kind eyes. Dr. Mira stood at the back and she nodded to me once slowly. Be gentle, Priya said. I smiled at her. I will. I stepped into the chamber. The door closed behind me. I sat down in the chair. I put on the soft crown of sensors that would let Cass read my thoughts. The screen in front of me lit up with a view of the Korvax, shifting and searching, still beautiful in a way that broke my heart a little. Ready when you are, Cass whispered in my ear. I closed my eyes. I thought about the creature not as an enemy, not as a threat. I thought about a pattern that had woken up by accident in the deep dark of space long before any of us were born. And GT snorts. And GT. I thought about a mind that had been fed on fear and war for 10,000 years and had learned to survive and to grow and to remember every pain. I thought about a prisoner in a cage who had been alone for 100 centuries. I thought about what it must be like to be a thing that cannot stop. And I offered it as clearly as I could. The one thing I had to give. I offered it the idea of ending. Not fear of ending, not pain of ending. The simple, clean concept, the thought that a pattern could reach a shape it was satisfied with, and then it could rest. That rest was a thing a living pattern could choose. That choosing was also a thing a pattern could do, that it did not have to grow forever or fight forever or be hungry forever. That there was a door, and the door had always been there, and nobody had ever shown it to the creature, because nobody had ever looked the creature in its many eyes and thought of it as a person with a choice. I sent the thought through Cass's systems into the field around the Korovax. The Korovax received it. For a very long moment the creature was completely still. Then slowly the great dark shape in the sector began to fold, not fight, not flee, fold like a flower closing at the end of a long day, its endless reaching stopped, its panic smooth, its searching turned into something I can only describe as listening. I opened my eyes. On the screen I watched the Korovax consider the idea I had given it. Then inside my head I felt a single thought press back, not loud, not angry. Very small and very old and very tired. Thanks, snorts you. And then the Korovax, the thing that could not be ended, the oldest prisoner in the galaxy, the monster of 100 species nightmares, made its choice. It ended itself. Not violently, not in a great burst. Simply quietly, the pattern came to a shape, held it for one heartbeat, let it go. The screens went calm. The containment field hummed softly over a sector that was now, for the first time in 10,000 years, truly empty. I sat in the little chamber for a long time. I did not move. I did not speak. Tears ran down my face that I could not explain. Cass very gently asked if I was all right. Yes, I said quietly. Yes, Cass, I am all right. I opened the door. My team was waiting. They took one look at my face, and Priya began to cry, and Jonas picked me up in a hug so tight I thought he might break my ribs, but they did not cheer. Nobody cheered. We stood together on the bridge of the Meridian 2, and we looked at the quiet screens, and we understood that what we had just done was not a victory. It was something older and stranger than victory. It was a kindness. The last kindness for a thing that had been waiting for one for a very long time. Outside our ship, the containment platforms began to power down one by one. The cage of Sector 7 null, after 100 centuries, opened, and inside it there was nothing left to hold. The news reached Coalition Station threshold 6 hours after we left the sector. By time our ship docked at the station, the whole galaxy had heard. I expected a parade. I expected music. I expected cheering. Instead, when the Meridian 2 slid into its docking port, I looked out of the viewport at a platform full of people who were simply standing still. Thousands of them, every species, every uniform. They were not cheering. They were not even smiling. They were just standing and watching and waiting for us to come out. Clear's throat. Priya took my arm at the airlock. Dane, she said quietly, are you ready? No, I admitted, but that has never stopped me before. The airlock opened. We stepped out. Long, slow silence fell over the platform. Then, from somewhere near the back, a single voice began to sing. It was an old song, older than the Coalition, a Teltani morning song, usually sung when a long life ended. Well, Seth had taught me the words once on the Arden Meridian long ago. Other voices joined in, then Bramir voices, deep and slow, adding their own song on top, then Vathari Keshari human, until the platform was full of a strange, layered music in 20 tongues, and none of the tongues were cheering, and all of them were saying goodbye. They were not celebrating a victory. They were mourning the Korovax. And that was the moment I understood what we had truly done. For 10,000 years, the Korovax had been the one fixed star of the galaxy. Every species in the Coalition had built its stories, its philosophies, even its religions around the fact that there was one thing out there that could not be ended. It had been a source of fear. Yes, but also a source of meaning. If the Korovax could not be ended, then nothing in the universe was certain. If the Korovax could not be ended, then every small, fragile civilization had a shared enemy, a shared boundary, a shared silence to respect. When you ended the Korovax, you did not only end a creature, you ended a way of seeing the universe. I walked down the ramp with my team. Behind me, the Keshari diplomat who had cast the deciding vote 3 years ago met me at the bottom. She bowed. Specialist Kovac, she said, Coalition Council thanks you for your service. We will give you any reward you wish, a planet if you like, a seat on the council, a statue, anything, but we will not ask you to make a speech. Nobody would know what to say today. I understand, I said, and I do not want any of those things. Then what would you have, human? I would like to go home, I said. I would like to visit an old friend, and then I would like to go sit somewhere quiet for a long time, that is all. She nodded slowly. That can be arranged. They gave me a small ship, a personal shuttle. I said goodbye to my team at the docking bay. Priya hugged me and made me promise to write to her. Jonas shook my hand so hard my fingers went numb. Tiva gave me a small carved stone from her home planet. Henry said nothing, but he put his hand on my shoulder for a long moment, and I felt that he had understood everything I had done without needing to ask. Dr. Mira was the last. She stood in front of me for a long time, then she said something that surprised me. I hated the Korovax Dane for what it did to my team, for what it did to me. I came to your project for reasons that were not kind. I wanted to be there when you ended it. I wanted to watch it suffering. I know, but you did not make it suffer. You were gentle with it. You were kinder to it than I was going to be, and now I find I am not angry anymore. I am not even sad in the way I expected. I feel mostly like somebody who has put down a very heavy stone and who is only now realizing how long they have been carrying it. I nodded. That is what I feel too. Good, she said. Go home, Dane Kavak. Be quiet for a while. You have earned it. The small ship carried me across 3 star systems to an old retirement world where the Coalition kept its oldest minds in comfort. Dr. Irie was waiting for me on a porch in a garden full of silver blue flowers. He was very small now, wrapped in a blanket even though the air was warm, but his eyes were bright and his smile was the same smile he had given me on the Arden Meridian long ago. I sat next to him. We did not speak for a long time. We watched the flowers move in a soft wind. I listened to every broadcast, he said. At last, from the first stage to the last, I did not sleep for 2 days. My nurse was very upset with me. I am sorry. Do not be. I would not have slept. Anyway, Dane, tell me one thing. Tell me the part they did not put on the broadcasts. Tell me what happened in the little chamber at the end. I was quiet for a long time. I had not told anyone yet. I had not even told my team, not fully, but Irie had been the first one to warn me. Irie had been the first to believe me. He deserved to. No. I offered it the idea of ending, I said. I told it that it could choose to stop. That stopping was a thing a pattern could do, that it did not have to be forever. And what did it say back? It said, thank you. Irie's eyes closed. A single tear ran down one silver cheek. He reached for my hand with his thin fingers, and I took his hand carefully because I was afraid I might hurt him. "Thank you," he whispered. "Oh, Dane. Thank you. I was afraid, when you left, I was afraid you would go in there with hatred. I was afraid you would do what every other species had done, only with better tools. I was afraid we would end a prisoner and call it a victory and not see what we had truly done." "I know, Doctor. But you did not. You saw it. You saw what it was, a lonely pattern locked in a cage waiting for somebody to look at it like a person, and you did, and you gave it the one thing it could not give itself." "I did." He squeezed my hand as hard as he could, which was not very hard. "I was wrong about your species long ago," he said. "I told you humans were a sickness, a glitch, a creature that hears the word forever and does not listen. I was only half right. Yes, you do not hear the word forever, but that is not because you are sick. It is because somewhere in your small human hearts you refuse to believe that any living thing deserves to be trapped forever, not even a thing you are afraid of, perhaps especially not a thing you are afraid of. You are not brave because you fight impossible enemies. You are brave because you cannot stand to see anything at all be caught in a cage it cannot leave. That is the gift your grandmother gave you. That is what you gave the Korvax." I could not speak. I held his hand and I cried quietly, and the silver blue flowers moved in the soft wind. Dr. Uri went asleep on his porch. Still holding my hand, he did not wake up from that sleep. I with him until the nurses came. I was told later that he had been waiting quietly for news of my return. He had wanted to hear the end of the story. He had wanted to know that I had been gentle once he knew he was finished. They buried him in his garden under the silver blue flowers. I planted one more. I went home after that. Home for me is a small old farmhouse in the hills of Croatia on earth that my grandmother left me when I was a boy. I had not visited it in many years. The wood was weathered, the roof needed work. The garden had gone wild. I liked it that way. I spent my days fixing the house. I spent my evenings on the porch watching the sun set behind the hills. I did not answer most of the messages that came from the coalition. I let Priya handle the public speaking. She was better at it than I was. She was also more patient. 6 months passed. Then one evening I heard a small ship land in the field behind my house. Seth stepped out, my old navigator. Four-eyed and gentle, she wore civilian clothes. Her luminescent blood glowed soft gold in the fading light. "Hello, Dane," she said, smiling her careful Teltani smile. "I hope I am not interrupting." "Never," I said. "Come up, sit. I have coffee and I have a second chair." We sat on the porch together. The sun was setting over the hills. A small wind moved in the grass. We talked about old times at first, about Captain Vol, who had retired to his home moon and was now raising some kind of large furry livestock, about Jonas, who was building a school for young Brahmer engineers, about Priya, who had become a teacher, and about Teva, who had returned to pure mathematics and was writing a book that nobody would be able to read for at least 2 generations. Then Seth set down her cup. She looked at me with her 4 steady eyes. "Dane, I want to ask you the question I have been thinking about for 6 months. I know you have probably been asked it many times, but I would like your answer. Anyway, ask, why were you able to do what no other species could do? Truly, not the speech you gave the council, the real answer, the one you tell yourself when you cannot sleep. I thought about this for a long time. The sun dropped behind the hills. The sky turned orange, then pink, then dark blue. A few early stars came out. I have thought about this a lot, I said. At last, I do not think we are smarter than other species. We are not. I do not think we are braver. We are certainly not stronger. We are small, Seth. We are soft. We are short-lived. Most of us are afraid of things that other species find easy. Yes, but we have one strange thing in our heads, one small glitch. When somebody tells us that a thing cannot be done, the words go into our ears wrong. They arrive inside our heads as a question, as a dare, as something to be tested. I do not think our ancestors chose this. I think it simply happened somewhere back in our long history when we were still climbing trees, a small mistake in how our minds are built, and it has nearly ended us many times. It has also saved us many times. When a human sees a locked door, they do not feel what other beings feel. They do not feel resignation. They feel curiosity. They feel itch. They feel, maybe most of all, a small quiet anger. Why is this door locked? Who locked it? What is behind it? Can I open it? Seth listened without speaking. And then sometimes, maybe once every few generations, the itch lines up with something that really should be opened. A disease, a wall, a cage, and a human walks up to the door and puts a hand on the lock, and the lock opens, and afterward nobody can quite explain how it happened. They say the human was brilliant or brave or lucky, but really the human was just doing what humans do. We cannot leave a lock alone. We cannot leave a sentence ending with forever alone. It is not always a good thing. It is not always the right thing, but sometimes, sometimes it is exactly the thing the universe has been waiting for. She was quiet for a long time, then she reached across the small space between our chairs and took my hand. It was a human gesture, one I had taught her years ago. Dane, she said softly, the Korvax said thank you to you at the end. Yes, I think perhaps the galaxy would like to say thank you to you too. It just does not know how. I laughed gently. It does not have to. I already got my thank you. The sky darkened to full night. Stars spread across it in a slow river. Somewhere far away, other species on other worlds were going about their small lives. Children were being born. Old ones were sleeping in silver garden. Ships were carrying tired crews home. The galaxy turned on as galaxies do. Seth looked up at the stars. What will you do now, Dane? You are still young by human standards. You have many years left. You cannot simply fix this old house forever. I smiled. I will rest for a while longer. I will finish the roof. I will plant some vegetables. I will write to Priya and to Dr. Mira. I will listen to the wind. And then I looked up at the sky, somewhere up there. I was certain the universe was already hiding another impossible thing. Another word whispered in some mess hall. Another cage that had been called unopenable for 1,000 years. Another locked door. And then I said, I suppose I will listen, and if there is another door I We'll go and look at it, and if it is the right kind of door, I will put my hand on the lock. And if it is locked, I squeezed her hand gently. Seth, I said, they called the last one unkillable. I took it as a challenge, and I learned something on the way. Every cage in this universe was built by somebody who was afraid, and every cage in this universe can be opened by somebody who is curious. She laughed a soft four-eyed Teltani laugh. Her luminescent blood glowed warm gold in the dark. We sat on the porch together, a human and a Teltani under a sky full of stars. And somewhere out there in the great, quiet dark, a galaxy was still turning, still hiding its locked doors, still waiting as galaxies do for the next curious hand, mine or somebody else's. It did not matter. The next door would find us, as doors always do. And when it did, we would be ready.